Hey gang, welcome back to my channel. This is another entry in our Chatting With series, and I am super thrilled for my current guest, David Hayward, aka Naked Pastor. David is a cartoonist. He's been doing cartoon work for over 15 years now with over thousands of cartoons. Prior to that, he spent over 30 years as a pastor. David's got a master's in theological studies, as well as undergraduate degrees in religious studies and ministry. Uh, he's also published 9 books, including this one right here, Flip It Like This, which is a fantastic book of cartoons.
Yep.
David, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Ruben. Thanks for inviting me to your show. I'm really happy to be here, and hi to all your viewers. I'm doing great, actually. We're in a cold spell right now. I'm up in Canada. That's where I live. And yeah, we're in a very cold spell right now. But, you know, being Canadian, I've got my T-shirt on and we're all ready for it. I've got my snowblower all gassed up and sawed out, ready to spread on the driveway and, you know, everything. So we're good to go. I've been looking forward to our talk.
Me too, David. And I guess just to unpack your origin story a little bit. So you were in pastoral work for over 30 years, and then something happened in your life that had you essentially do a career change. What do you want to tell us about that story?
Yeah, so I was in the church basically, I tell people I was in the church basically my whole life, but I served as a pastor in some kind of pastoral capacity for about 30 years. And it was in 2010 when I realized I could no longer continue on my own spiritual path while remaining in the organizational church, the institutional church. So I had to make a tough decision that my time in the ministry had come to an end. And because of the situation here, small town, everything, that equated to me leaving the church as well. And it was just the main reason was I could no longer keep growing at my own rate and pace and the way I wanted to while in that situation. So the only way I could figure out how to keep moving forward personally was to leave the ministry. Yeah.
Gotcha. Did you have what we like to term today as a type of deconstruction in that moment, or?
Well, interesting. My deconstruction actually happened or started way back when I was graduating from seminary. So we're talking 1983 when I started deconstructing. So for me, it was a very slow kind of a glacial melt deconstruction. But I think there's 2 kinds of deconstruction. I say this quite a bit. There's a theological deconstruction, and then there's ecclesiological deconstruction. That is deconstructing from the church or changing your relationship to the church. So theological deconstruction, you're changing your relationship to beliefs and faith and so on. Whereas with ecclesiological deconstruction, you're changing your relationship to the church. So when I left the ministry in 2010, yeah, that was a very traumatic, kind of cataclysmic deconstruction from the church. And it was very difficult. Lisa and I had a really difficult next few years as we adjusted to life outside of the ministry and outside of the church.
Right. And I guess in terms of your work as a cartoonist, I love what you put in your preface in your book, Flip It Like This, how you actually started it in 2006 rather, and that you essentially challenged yourself to see if that was even something you could do in like a 30-day challenge, I guess. And here you are 15 years later, still at it. So in terms of this kind of 2010 moment, had it only just been a hobby where you're kind of just still working, were you already making headway as a cartoonist? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been an artist as long as I can remember. I grew up in a home where my dad painted and everything. He was on the side. He painted on the side. And so I was around art. I drew, I painted ever since I can remember. You know, I always did well in art class in school and all that kind of a thing. And then when I went into the ministry and so on, as a very young man, I was always painting and drawing on the side. I'd never actually drawn cartoons, but I was an artist. And I even, you know, sold some of my paintings and so on in galleries and online and so on. And I started my blog Naked Pastor way back in 2004, 2005. And I was sharing, you know, I was writing blog posts, and once in a while I would share one of my paintings and so on. But it was in 2006 when I decided to try drawing cartoons, which is a whole other world. I love a good cartoon and I love good cartoonists. And so I thought, you know, there was a cartoonist I saw, he was doing a cartoon every day. I thought, I'm going to try that, just see what happens. And I was really surprised by the reaction. Like my first cartoons were, looking back at them now, I kind of cringed a little bit, but you know, I've drawn some good ones and not so good ones, but I just really appreciated the reaction and response I was getting from people. And they just starting to spread all over the world, and everybody sharing them and liking them and commenting on them. So in 2010, when I left the ministry, my first gig after that actually was, there's a university here locally, and I went and taught at that for a couple of years. And then I decided to see if I could make Naked Pastor a full-time gig. And I just dove into the deep end there, and it worked. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Well, and I can tell you what, like, you are brilliant. I actually had quite a bit of feeling a little bit of the Far Side as in some of this, because I think what's really cool, that single panel cartoon experience, like you elaborated a little bit in some of your prefaces, you can't unsee it, right? And I just think that the single panel is an incredibly powerful medium. I just thoroughly love so much of your work. The fact that you've drawn thousands, what was it like trying to find your essentially best of selection for this book right here?
Yeah, that was really tough. I have actually close to 5,000 cartoons now, and the publisher wanted me to, you know, get it down to about 130 plus draw another 15 never before seen cartoons exclusive to this book. Boy, oh boy, that took a long time, and it was painstaking. It was like killing my children, you know, choosing which ones could live and which ones, you know, couldn't. So it was a very, very difficult process. But as a result, you know, that this was a cooperative effort between me and my publisher. But as well, you know, you just get to know which cartoons are most loved by the people out there. And so that's basically what we went on. The ones I liked the most, the one the publisher liked the most, and the one the public liked the most. So we came up with the best ofs. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, a couple that really stood out for me in particular is you've got the going away PTSD present, right? That was, I think it's quite a powerful message. I also probably, I think one that really resonated with me is the one where you have God essentially trying to be fit into the theological box, right? And you know, David, that's kind of one thing that really resonated with me a lot, because one of the things on my own spiritual journey I've uncovered is that depending on which church you go to, who you talk to, etc., I find it to be quite a bit prominent in what we would call the evangelical circles, but a lot of folks seem to try to squeeze God down into the literalness of the Bible. And God is definitely in the Bible. I fully believe it's completely inspired by God. But God is so much bigger than that. And I've always looked at in the kind of the Old Testament reference, right? The earth is his
Right.
footstool. He can't be contained by the universe, much less, you know, a worship place, the house that Solomon tried to build for him, right? God can never be contained by things of this nature, by human nature. How could we possibly expect that God is exclusive to just only the Bible? He's so much bigger than that. And I really loved that panel because I
Yeah.
think it just, that speaks to a lot of people. It definitely spoke to me for sure.
Yeah, it's one of my most popular ones. And yeah, I agree. Like it's like it's said the word is not the thing. You know, the word God is not God, neither is the idea of God. So my challenge is what is beyond the word and what is beyond the idea. Do we dare go there? And you know, it kind of reminds me of the story of the people being invited to meet with God on the mountain, and then they're too afraid, and so they send Moses instead and ask him to report back. And I think that is a really good analogy of our relationship with the other, with God or whatever, is it's too scary, it's too frightening, too terrifying. And so we would rather just deal with an intermediary like the Bible or a pastor or a word or an idea rather than the thing itself.
Definitely. And I think, you know, since you have such a strong heart for the marginalized in today's culture, that definitely resonates throughout your book. And I found it powerful in a humbling way myself, because I can tell you that it's really sad when you will hear, or at least for me, when I'll hear a fellow Christian say they love Jesus, but then have that kind of finger of condemnation, right? And so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that goes back to what I was saying about not confining God to a theological box, and says God is love, and we want to seek to understand how God's moving in our culture, I think is probably more important than necessarily trying to be too dogmatic about it.
Yeah.
Like I loved your LGBTQ sheep, for example. I think those really resonate very powerfully. And I think you kind of shared a little bit in some of your again prefacing about your art in this area, where you've gotten some polarizing feedback. What can you share in terms of like that full spectrum of how you had reactions in terms of a lot of your art in this context?
Yeah. So I it's I'm not comparing myself to scripture or Jeremiah or anybody like that, but I think the truth has a double edge to it, a double-edged sword. Like so, on one edge is my cartoons. I hope to encourage the discouraged and to enhearten the disheartened, and to validate the invalidated, and to include the marginalized or the excluded, and so on. So one edge of my cartoons are very encouraging to people who are LGBTQ or women or people who are deconstructing, or people of color, or heretics, or whatever, people who are have been traditionally marginalized. I hope my cartoons, my art is encouraging to them. On the other hand, the other edge would be challenging any systems, people, or ideas that would marginalize and exclude and condemn and judge and so on. So there's that double edge. That's why my cartoons, some people like one cartoon, some people will absolutely love it, and other people will absolutely hate it. And so it kind of has that double edge to it. The people who hate my, let's say, my LGBTQ cartoons, they hate it because they think gay people, etc., shouldn't be gay. They should be excluded. So it's challenging to them, where it wouldn't be encouraging to an LGBTQ person because I'm saying they should be included. So
Right.
yeah, it's interesting that my art has that sort of double edge to it, and makes life interesting.
Yeah, and just that whole dichotomy of inclusivity versus exclusivity. Yeah, I mean, you even had a panel about that one as a for instance,
Yeah,
and I know loved another one about you had the sheep that were looking outside that just going, oh, he said God loves everybody, but you know what I mean. So I just absolutely loved it. What can you tell us about though the one that's actually on the cover? Flip it like this.
yeah.
That inspired you to have essentially Jesus showing a woman how to flip the table. What kind of backstory do you have about this one?
Okay, so my first I drew a cartoon called Overturning, and that's where it just shows Jesus. He's kind of like an action figure, spreading his arms and tables flying in all directions and coins. And that is based on the story of Jesus, cleansing the temple, entering the temple and upsetting the tables of the money changers. And people love that cartoon as well. But a friend of mine, her name's Tracy, asked me if she actually commissioned me to draw a cartoon for her of Jesus teaching her how to flip a table. She thought that would be cool. And so that's what I came up with Jesus showing her how to flip a table. So he's flipping the table and he's saying, you flip it like this. So I don't think she needs to be taught how to flip a table. Most women I know in my life don't need to be taught how to flip a table. But it's actually a commentary on the validity of action for justice. So rather than just talking about justice and so on, that there's actual, nonviolent kind of action. Some people might say flipping a table is violent, but not me. People weren't hurt. But for me, it's a symbolic gesture, a prophetic one of that challenges the taking advantage of the poor, for example. And so that's what I think that would symbolize.
Definitely. And I also loved another really neat one where you have Jesus standing over the woman on the computer saying, I dare you to send it. That one was quite funny too. So
yeah, I dare you to post it. Yeah,
yeah, that was it.
yeah. I've been in that situation many times where I thought this cartoon, I don't know how it's going to go. And that still small voice, you can hear it. I dare you to post it.
Yeah, they're quite funny, and they definitely tell a story for sure. It's just I just had so much fun with this book, and we could spend all day talking about that. But I do want to pivot for a second because
Sure.
you're also quite a talented artist, and you have three big collection themes. You've got Images of Christ, the Sophia collection, the Timber series.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a minute, I guess, first pivot to the Sophia series on your actual YouTube channel. You actually even have a couple of segments on this, kind of explaining this is a little bit of a backstory in terms of your own story in life.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely have a little bit of a link to let people go check that out in its full detail on your YouTube. But
Yeah.
what I found really powerful well, there's quite a few of them actually. I'm sure we could spend all day, but I think two that really spoke to you was the bear with the teddy bear one, right?
Yeah, that was the first one I drew. Yeah.
And then for me, the one that maybe you can take a minute to talk about that just I found incredibly powerful was the Sophia Entangled print. I mean, this one I just think is so powerful. I feel like so much in my life where
Yeah.
I'm in self bondage because if I'm understanding the art correctly, Sophia is entangled in her own hair, right?
Yeah.
Around her
Yeah.
whole body. And so I was like, my goodness, this is just an incredible piece of art right here. What do you want to tell us more
Yeah.
beyond what you have on the website?
So after I left the ministry, I was in shock, and I didn't realize it. Excuse me. And I just started one afternoon drawing. It was a Sunday afternoon, actually. I just started drawing a picture very, not in my style at all, very unusual style for me, of just black and white, pencil and pen. And when I was done, there was this picture of a grizzly bear towering over a little girl holding up a teddy bear to the grizzly bear. And I called it Fearless. And Lisa's like, what's that? Like that, it was just so unusual for me. I do nice landscape watercolors and cartoons and things, but this was totally out of my lane. Like it was just very different style for me. I was like, I don't know, I just felt like drawing it. And then, I just kept drawing this young girl or young woman in the wilderness with animals, usually a full moon somewhere. And I think it was like 8 drawings in when I realized, oh my goodness, I'm drawing my own, this is my story of my, so Sophia is Greek for wisdom. And so that name just came to me. Her name's Sophia. And I realized I was drawing the story of my own wisdom coming to life and being liberated from the oppressive life in the ministry and in institutional religion and, the oppression of that wisdom. And it was just the liberation of Sophia, the liberation of wisdom, my wisdom. And I ended up drawing 62 drawings, and I wrote a meditation for each one, and I compiled them in a book called The Liberation of Sophia. And so basically that was my story. And so each picture, I never planned what I was going to draw. I would just sit down. Lisa would be working late as a nurse. I would sit down, have some wine, have the music blaring, and I would just start drawing, and whatever came out, came out. And Entangled was one of them, where I just draw a woman who is obviously all tangled in her own long hair. And for me, that symbolized me just being entangled in all my own issues, just being all caught up in myself, trapped in my own head, trapped in my own life, all my issues just weighing me down and making me feel trapped. And it's sort of like every one of these pictures are snapshots into Sophia's journey towards her own liberation and breaking free from all these issues that she was having to deal with while in the church and oppressed. So yeah, and then the final picture is called Light, where she's walking out of the dark room in like a cave into the light. And that's the last picture in that series. So it's a very interesting process for me, very cathartic. But so many people really, really identify with that story, especially women, but many men too.
Definitely. And on your Image of Christ series, where you've got those in individual print, but also the Christ collage, and actually also, just maybe to segue real quick back to one of your cartoon panels, where you had Jesus admiring what we consider the blonde white Jesus in the art gallery. And I really loved in your image of Christ collection, David, how you've got Jesus in various different forms, representative of a lot of different themes and
Right.
issues that we have today. One that definitely spoke to me for sure, because I have a heart for the homeless, was the Buy Change artwork.
Yes.
And I thought that one was really quite interesting. But the one I wanted to take a minute to get a little bit more info on you was the Survivor drawing, because I see that one, and that one just could speak 1,000 words as well. What did you want to tell us more about that particular drawing?
Survivor.
The one with Jesus all battered and beaten behind the target as the halo,
yes,
right?
target. Yes. Yeah, that's I still own the original to that. Nobody seems to want to buy that one, even though it's a very popular image. But I think maybe somebody wouldn't want to hang that up in their house or something, because it is kind of graphic. But it shows Jesus standing before, in each of these images of Christ, actually, there's 16 or 17 of them now. There's a halo, and the halo is different for each one. So for one where he's a refugee, there's barbed wire. The change one you mentioned is a unhoused person, but his halo's a rolled up sleeping bag. And I don't know if you noticed that or not. and then included Jesus, his halo is the LGBTQ rainbow colors and so on. So with this one, Survivor, his halo is actually a target. And what I wanted to address was that Jesus identifies with those who are abused and mistreated and beaten, and who have a target on their back. And so that's what that picture's about. It kind of the theme of the whole series really, it reminds me of Mother Teresa, who in Calcutta believed that she saw the face of Jesus in every child on the street. And I think a true Christian spirituality, a healthy one, sees the image of Christ in every living thing. And so that's what this whole series is about, is maybe helping us, training us to see the spirit of Jesus in everybody that we encounter, no matter their race or gender or color or language or status or anything like that.
So good. And the reason why I mentioned the art gallery cartoon panel is because I wonder if you received any again, this whole polar opposites of feedback. Did you have anybody in your Christ lecture tell you that's not what Jesus looks like? Did you get any of that?
I often draw Jesus. See, most of my cartoons are just black and white line drawings, right? And so there's no color at all, no gray, just black and white line drawings. But some of my cartoons I shade in or add color. And so I do have a lot of cartoons of Jesus with brown skin. And I do get a lot of people angry that I do that. Some people really do believe Jesus was white and insist on that. And some people complain that I don't make him dark enough or not light enough or whatever. Or some people just hate the fact that I'm making this all political, rather than spiritual or whatever. So,
or how many people might dare to call you a heretic for even daring to even draw him at all, right? So,
well, yeah, I've gotten that as well. And people, yeah. So that one, Jesus is looking at a painting in an art gallery, and he's got brown skin, and he's looking at a painting of himself, a portrait, and he's all blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin, bright white shiny teeth, the whole thing. So
yeah,
it's funny.
I love it. Well, so I guess to kind of land the plane, David, tell us, tell the folks how they can find you and maybe anything else you're working on, because you've also got, like I mentioned earlier, you're a publisher. You've got 9 books published. You've got a website. You've got an Instagram, a Twitter. What might you be working on, or how would you like people to get this book and anything else that you've got going on?
Yeah, so flip it like this. You can buy it where books are sold, right? So it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indie Books, and your local bookstore, you can ask for it. But yeah, it's a great little book. It's under $20. People are buying it to leave in their bathrooms, in their guest rooms. They're mailing them to their pastors or ex-pastors. They're giving them to their in-laws and so on. So it's a wonderful little book and good for gifts too. But I have so many things on the go. I'm working on my Timber series. She's another woman who has come to me, who I'm drawing sort of post deconstruction, and then I'm actually thinking of compiling a book of some of my best paintings and writing meditations on deconstruction. I'm going to call it The Art of Deconstruction. And so I'm building my YouTube channel, like you have a YouTube channel. I'm building my YouTube channel and trying to make more videos. And I'm just very busy doing things all the time. Having fun though. But you can find me at nakedpastor.com. That's sort of my base camp. And then from there, you can find me everywhere else. I'm on all social media.
Definitely check out nakedpastor.com. He's got a website. You can also use @nakedpastor at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and that's now even the ad mention on YouTube as well. So
That's right.
y'all check out David Hayward's stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
David, it was absolutely my pleasure chatting with you today. I had such a good time. Thank you so much for coming on.
Likewise, thank you, Ruben. Nice to meet you.
God bless you.
You too. Take care.
All right, gang, that's it for this episode. If you like my content, please consider subscribing to my channel. God bless you guys.